Hey everybody, welcome back to Roto Curve for today's pitching segment. It's real quick. Just want to talk about yesterday's pitchers, guys we liked, guys we didn't like, and how they performed. Yesterday was Max Scherzer's probably his worst outing of the season. He ended up with just, I believe, 3.7 fantasy points on DraftKings. He didn't have much more than that on FanDuel. And for those of you that had him yesterday, he struggled, and he probably kept you out of cash, especially at that price tag. Some other pitchers we talked about were Corey Kluber was very good against the Astros. He didn't work as deep into the game as he probably could have, but he still ended up with 28 fantasy points on DraftKings and close to about 18 or 19 on FanDuel. Manny Benuelos didn't pitch as well as we thought he may have been able to, or his talent level enables him to do. He only had one strikeout, but he did get the win. He only allowed one or two earned runs, and it was a pretty good return for his price, considering he was very cheap on both sites. The other guy, Edison Volquez, was pretty good as well. He was just over twice his value, which is a decent return, but he didn't necessarily blow the backs off of anybody. The last guy was Andrew Haney, pitched very well at Coors Field, and for those of you that had him, it was a source of points that not many other people did have. The other pitcher in Coors Field, though, not so good. Chad Bettis got shelled yesterday. The Los Angeles Angels were able to touch him up for a few runs. Albert Pujols hit a home run. Trout hit a home run. They had a whole bunch of hits. And Cole Calhoun was actually worth his price as well. So the one of the teams in Coors performed well, but Haney was able to get some fantasy points. And for those of you that had him, that went a long way today, especially with Scherzer struggling. Let's talk about today's pitchers real quick. Clayton Kershaw pitches today. So obviously he's the top play on the day. He's the top play every time he pitches, most likely, unless there's a day where Scherzer pitches or where Kluber pitches against a poor offense. But today is for Clayton Kershaw, and I think I'm going to stay away from him on DraftKings, but I'll have him on FanDuel, and I want to tell you why. On DraftKings, his price is over $13,000, which means to yield the expectancy that we need from him, he's going to need close to 40 fantasy points, which is really tough to get for any pitcher, let alone a guy like Clayton Kershaw, especially for a guy like Clayton Kershaw, because Kershaw is the best left-handed pitcher in the game right now. But the problem is the Phillies don't strike out too much. And for a guy to get 40 fantasy points on DraftKings or over 20 on FanDuel, which I'll talk about in a little bit, they're going to need a lot of those strikeouts. So if he's not getting double-digit strikeout, he's probably not returning the price, especially on DraftKings, which means I'm going to probably stay away from him there. Now, that could change depending on if the Phillies matchup it gets a little bit better depending on what lineup they release later in the day. But for now, I'm probably staying away from him on DraftKings. But I will have him on FanDuel. I'll talk about why there, because his price is very manageable. It's very expensive, but considering the bats on FanDuel, they're very cheap. You can get guys like Aaron Hill, who's cheap. There's still some Dodgers lefties that can be had very cheap going against Adam Morgan today. So you can manage the bats on that site to be able to fit Clayton Kershaw in, but it's a bit tougher to do so on DraftKings. And it's easier for a guy like Kershaw to reach value, which is a kind of a mythical thing in baseball, but we still like to talk about it in terms of price point. And he can reach that because on FanDuel, all you register is innings pitched and strikeouts. And you don't have to get any minus points for hits or walks or things like that. So Kershaw could get to 20, even against the Phillies. You don't strike out much because he has the ability to get a win, which is huge on FanDuel. He's a minus 400 favorite. It may come down a little bit, but excuse me. Those 4 points are huge, especially for a guy that needs to get to 20 to get the expectancy we need. So I probably will have him on FanDuel. And obviously the next guy is Chris Archer, who is one of the better right-handed pitchers in the game. But I'm not sure I could target him against the Royals who don't strike out too much. Now, those are the top two guys everybody's going to talk about today. But I want to talk about some guys that maybe fly a bit under the radar. Maybe they shouldn't be. The first guy is my top option in cash games, 50-50s and head-to-heads, pretty much every time he pitches, especially in a good matchup, and that's Michael Wacha. Wacha faces the Chicago Cubs today. He costs about $9,400 on DraftKings and a little bit cheaper at $8,600 on FanDuel. The reason why I like him today is because, of course, the Cubs are known for striking out a lot at over 24% so far this season against righties. But a lot of people will tend to stay away from that offense because of guys like Chris Bryant, guys like Javier Baez when he comes up. They have all this young talent, and I think there's been too much of a fuss made about that. Excuse me. But the problem is those guys just aren't hitting. The Cubs are hitting just .236. Their slugging percentage and isolated power numbers are way down, and they're just not hitting as well as we thought, especially against right-handed pitching. And that's huge for Wacha today because a lot of the issues with Wacha in his career have been his ability to get strikeouts. Now, he's been striking out a lot of hitters of late. I believe he has 5 or more in 4 straight starts. And with the Cubs striking out a lot, it gives him the ability to not only get deeper in the game and get a win, but get those strikeouts, which is huge for me because Walker's been a guy that's been very successful without those strikeouts. So adding that in gives him another tool to use and another way to get fantasy points in your lineups. The one thing I want to discuss with Walker is the fact that he's one of the most consistent, if not the consistent pitcher in the game. He has just about, I think, 80% quality starts. And the reason why I want to talk about that is more than 6 innings and less than 3 earned runs, which is a quality start, is huge in daily fantasy because it gives you the ability to work towards a win and pitch deeper into games, which is Walker has done a lot. He rarely has 20 to 30 points or more than 25 points on DraftKings and more than 20 points on FanDuel. But he rarely has less than 10 as well, which is big because that means you're going to get a consistent option and a consistent option today against a great matchup. It's one of the reasons why I like to target him pretty much every week, but especially today in a great matchup. The next guy I want to discuss is my tournament option for today. That's Trevor Bauer against the Astros. Excuse me, losing my voice a little bit. The one thing I wanted to discuss with Bauer is the fact that the Astros have the highest strikeout rate against right-handed pitching so far this season. Now, one of the issues with him is the fact that he has walked a lot of batters in his career, and that's one of the things that people like to stray away from him. But he's only walked 2 guys in the last 2 starts, and that's a big thing for me because that means his control is getting a little bit better. Now, the reason why I can't start him in my 50-50s and head-to-heads today, that Astros offense has just been too good. They have guys like Preston Tucker that are hitting well from the left side. Colby Rasmus is back, and obviously the young superstar Carlos Correa is really adding a stable option to that offense. One of the reasons why I like to target against the Astros we talked about was their strikeouts, but the other reason is they're a free-swinging team. If you watch them hit, they're trying for those home runs, and you see those games where they score 8 or 9 runs, they're hitting 3 or 4 home runs. They're hitting a lot of doubles. They're hitting a lot of triples. They can get the ball in the gap, and that's one of the things why I can't take Bauer in my cash games, but the ability that he has to strike hitters out with one of the best sliders in baseball, facing the Astros, who strike out the most in baseball against right-handed pitching, it could be a perfect matchup in a tournament that could bring you to the top. Now, he will be also very low owned as well, which is a big thing because normally when guys have the strikeout ability face the Astros, they will be very highly owned. But considering today with guys like Kershaw and Archer pitching, I think Bauer's price tag is going to be a little bit too much for people to pay, and they'd rather pay a couple more thousand to get those top guys. That makes Bauer a very low-owned option, and a guy with the strikeout ability that he has, that makes for a great play in a tournament. That pretty much wraps up my thoughts for today's pitching slate. Be sure to monitor the lineups page on RotoCurve. You can see the lineups as soon as they come out, and that pretty much can change things. If a team has a very good lineup and some guys are sitting, it changes things a little bit. And be sure to keep an eye on that because I'll be making a decision on Kershaw based on that as well later. Also, keep an eye out for Danielle's weather updates. She tweeted earlier that all 11 games are outside today, so there could be some weather issues. Good luck tonight, and be sure to turn into tomorrow's edition of our pitching segment.